But if you want to get together and fight, good buddy, that's what I want to hear.
Movement collapses, and they know that, but it's really hard to rationalize to a 20-something that let them hit you as part of their plan to discredit you. And I'm not saying no one should ever respond with physical violence to officers. I'm not advocating that, and I hope I'm not coming across that way, because that's not my intention. But it's a lesson that is hard to teach. It's hard to teach.
Yeah, because like, I understand what everyone's saying, but we actually have to look at what happened in Oakland this past weekend. 2,000 protesters, 2,000 marchers. By the way, the police started kettling the march at 1 p.m. behind the Children's Brigade. They started kettling behind the Children's Brigade. And like, I just want to emphasize that point, because that's how aggressive the police came out in Oakland. I wasn't there. These are just like stories that I've heard, Facebook videos that I've seen. But the way the media started trying to spin it, and the way that Jean Kwan is actually trying to spin it, is like we were responsible for the violence on that day. Like, let's be clear, the police were responsible for the violence on that day. The fact that 2,000 people came out, 300 people are arrested, and that like hundreds of people had to escape from being arrested through a YMCA with the help of workers to go through. Like, we didn't create that violence. I really want to emphasize that, because it's like, I think the big question is who's creating the violence and why. Like, if you look at the Occupy movement, we didn't start any of it. Like, it was the police. That came in, and even on the Brooklyn Bridge, when the initial 700 arrests, they led the police there. And then also, I just want to share an anecdote. When police officers came to Occupy Cal, there's this person who had trumped up charges, and he was non-violently linking arms with people to protect his camp. He was a person of color, and he was picked out by the cops and like jabbed numerous amount of times with the baton, and then like had one of the most racist experience going back into jail and being processed out of it. Like, the police do that to divide us and to basically say that, hey, yeah, you guys are responsible for the violence. Like, that that is not true, and that's what I want to come out as well.
Nobody is saying that. You know, we're not saying that to you.
I just don't think it was highlighted. The media saying that, and I don't think it's being highlighted right now as that.
But if you saw what happened to people who were sitting at lunch counters in Alabama, they were trying to integrate the lunch. They were getting hot coffee poured on them. Right. They were putting. I mean, they went through. Yeah.
And we are going through the same thing right now. The 300 people that were in jail for 3 days, they had to take pregnancy tests, they had to take TB tests, they slept in cells with 50 or more people in them, they barely got to sleep, they got trumped up charges. I'm not saying that like it's one and the same, but it's like the brutalizing continues now, and there's a reason for that. They want to stop our movement.
Who started it? Can we actually flip back together? Robin's got something to say.
I've got something to say. It's to respond to, I guess, you there when you were talking about.
Oh, mine is Robin too.
Oh, it is.
Oh,
Robin. So it's responding to your comment about UC Davis and the kids were just sitting there non-violently being pepper sprayed. I saw afterwards that there was a different kind of response. I want to bring up another kind of response that people have when people are doing the right thing by just staying non-violent in the face of violence, is that there's other ways to make commentary, and this one was satire. I don't know how many of you saw it on Tumblr, on the TUMBLR site, where somebody put on a site going pepper spray cop through history, and they invited everybody to take works of art and put pepper spray cop in that work of art, you know, with him spraying like that. And it was the funniest thing I ever saw. It was like somebody aimed the cop into the Scream picture, and he was aiming his pepper spray into the mouth of the Scream. They had him walking through Sunday in the park, you know, Sunday in the park, and they're all sitting there, and he's spraying everybody in the park. And one of my favorites was, "Where's Waldo?" And this guy, the comment was, "He'll never find me, he'll never find me, he'll never find me." Ah! And then you're trying to find him in like 8,000, little figures, and you finally found pepper spray going after somebody. But that was one of the best responses that I saw, that it was being done with humor, it was being done with satire, it was being done with art. And I just want to say there's a broader response to this, and people were picking up on that.
I would say that's really dangerous. I think that turns a very serious situation into comedy and takes away the impact of what that really was. That person violently sprayed, non-violent,
Right.
Attacks.
Oh, I'm not making a comic.
And I think, no, I know, but it is. I mean, I saw the pictures. I think they're hilarious.
It's funny,
But
but
the
I'm
truth
not
of the
finding it
matter
funny,
is,
no.
that's how violence is constructed, and that's how we manufacture consent for violence from the police in this society. If we continue to manufacture consent for violence from the police and condemn us for using the same tactic, we're hypocrites, and we need to look at ourselves for that, right? We need to answer that question internally before we...
What's your point again?
Well, it's like effeminate, they can't take a joke.
Well, no, I mean, my whole point is that we need to take violence very seriously,
That's right.
and if we
Yeah.
turn it into a joke, we as a society start looking at it as the standard coming from police, and then we get really worried when people perpetrate the same crimes, and there's a disconnect there. There's a little bit of hypocrisy there that we need to look at in ourselves. Why is it okay for police to conduct that kind of violence and we can make a joke out of it? Maybe if we had the black bloc burning everything in pictures, it would be cute and accepted. No, that's not the case.
But to me, it's not a joke and it's not funny. It
Well-
was another way for people to make commentary that this is not okay to do. That's what.
To make the
so-
police look ridiculous. I mean,
So-
Yeah, I
It's
think
not
it
gonna
manufactures
seem-
consent for violence.
Okay, whatever.
And so, one thing that I heard thrown around was the name Gandhi, and I want to touch on that because the biggest thing that we've seen in this movement is the split between violence. And I want to be careful about what I consider the Gandhi pill. If you go to India and you talk to the people there about the revolution, a lot of the time Gandhi was not the main figure. I'm blanking on the man's name right now. But often this man's name is brought up, and he was a militant figure, and they contribute a lot of the changing in India to him. We have glorified Gandhi, and we have made him this westernized, let's be nonviolent, and we'll stand up against these people. But when we look at the facts, the way and what really had gone down in history, a lot of what had been done in the groundwork was not done by that.
But you guys started in Pakistan, I mean,
The division.
No, but I forget his name, and it's unfortunate I do, but and I've done some research on this, and we have to be careful with how we misconstrue our history. People are killing people. Like violence, you don't just not be violent. I'm not for violence recklessly or without strategy. I don't think you should be violent unless you have to defend yourself, and the option is not to get out of harm's way. But we can't glorify what people have done to work for our standards, and the history behind India was Gandhi is sometimes not even looked at as somebody who stood for India and its people. As people were getting killed, he said, don't be violent. And so a lot of people don't look at that in that country that way. So the Gandhi pill, watch out.
I also want to expand on this because I think we can say the same thing about Martin Luther King Jr. He wasn't the only person that was a leader within the movement. There were like many leaders within the civil rights movement. I think we have to note the Black Panthers. Like they were notable in Oakland. They started a breakfast program for kids, and also believed in militantly defending their neighborhood. So like I think there's a lot to learn about our history as well, about where our change actually came from. And it wasn't just through the civil rights movement and nonviolent movement. There was urban rebellions in the 60s and 70s, and there's reasons why that violence, that like they used violence to protect their own neighborhood because the state wasn't protecting them. They were fighting against them. I can go through strike after strike after strike where they had to occupy their factory and militantly defend it because they were being screwed over by their bosses or by the state. So like I think there's a more nuanced way to look at this.
Can I just say something else too? I know we're having a conversation about violence and nonviolence, but we are nonviolent. This is all sort of theoretical. Okay, I just want to make that clear to people who may not know.
All right, I think, why don't we open up for questions? Lovely. All right.
Yes, I'd just like to say one thing. and that is that police are threats. Whenever I see a policeman, I always feel threatened. So I can understand why there was so much reaction in Oakland and not so much in San Francisco, thank goodness. But they're trained to attack, to defend society. They are not trained to go gentle. And we have to keep that in mind, first of all. I called my supervisor in here, David Chu, and I said, do you have to send the police to Justin Herman Plaza? Why don't you send the guardian angels? You know, they're peaceful, and they've done a lot of good by going into some of the communities. But that's all I wanted to say. I just feel that we can't change that. Police are trained to be defensive, to be ready in case someone is injured, and to protect property.
So for me, the scariest thing that has been highlighted by the Occupy movement is the militarization of our police force. $500 million from the federal government has been given to localized police force. Oakland announced their budget cuts yesterday, and the police force is staying fully funded. You know, so I think we need to consider where our priorities are. Do we value property more than people? How do we rationalize having a police force that is able to enact that kind of force on its own people? I mean, this is South America-like styles,
yes,
you know,
Yeah,
it's very scary. And yeah, and I think it's all in the name of property. It's all in the name of privatized property. And I think we need to look at ourselves and say, wait, is this really the system we want to live under? Yeah, I'm comfortable in my house, I'm comfortable with what I have, but is it worth it if it means that I'm marginalized as an American? Is it worth it? And it's a hard question for a lot of people. I'm not saying that I have the answer. I don't.
I've got one more question, then we'll go back to the audience. Folks have talked a lot, actually, within and I think outside the Occupy movement about the police as people, right? That like they don't actually make that much money, and they do put their lives on the line, and they do some things that we really appreciate, right? They do some things we really don't appreciate, but the question is there a way to engage with individual officers or in law enforcement as members of the 99% and sort of draw them in a certain way?
I had a very unusual conversation with a Federal Reserve policeman. I was shocked, actually. I was talking with him. That's the first time I've ever talked with a Federal Reserve policeman. I mean, a lot of things were new for me. I'd never actually gone up and talked with somebody. And he said that he actually agreed with the movement. And I said, so what are you doing? He says, well, it's a job. I have a family to feed. I just wanted to put that out. I wasn't expecting that answer. So.
I actually don't think the police are part of the 99%. I don't. And I'll say why. Because the Occupy movement has felt a lot like there's been intense police brutality against the Occupy movement for the past 4 months or so since the existence. I think what we forget is that if we go into the Bayview, if we go into Hunters Point, if we go into Oakland, they get harassed by the police on a daily basis. I have not been to the Bayview. I have not been to Oakland. I haven't even been in the Mission, where I live, where they're not constantly racially profiled or stopped by the police or harassed by the police on a daily basis. And I think there's, we have to look at the reasons for that. And they are there to protect the 1%. They're there to protect the property of the 1%. And I disagree I know their pay scale in San Francisco is significantly higher than what the average person makes in San Francisco, and there's a reason for that. So I think maybe individuals, maybe if they stepped out, but as a whole, they are not part of the 99%. They are there to dictate what the 1% says, and there's a reason why they've been after us for these past 4 months, from Wall Street to Oakland to San Francisco, where they've vacated raided all of our encampments, and I can't say they're winnable, not at this point.
So I think that ultimately, if the system keeps going the way it's going, they won't have a choice but to become the 99%. They either get to do it voluntarily, or our system ends up hurting so many people that they're forced into participating in our movement. I would like to see them do it voluntarily. It means a lot more to me if someone volunteers to participate in this movement versus waiting for either another economic collapse or a natural disaster to realize that it's important to learn to work with people, not against them. So I think that change is something that can happen. I know a lot of people. I talked to an officer who was like, hey, when you have a healthcare march, let me know. I want to participate in that. Right? Very lovely guy. The next day he's literally beating people. And it's like, it's a convoluted message. Your job does not mandate that you hit people, throw tear gas, or throw flash grenades, whatever they are, flash bangs, whatever. This is not the job description. The job description is protect the people that pay your salary here in San Francisco. That's around $100,000 a year for an officer.
So I've always been a very optimistic person, and I think the scariest thing in the world this is also kind of related to the last question, it's really not the 1%, it's like the 0.001%, I feel, that are really the threat to our democracy. The scariest thing in the world for them would be for all of us, including the police, to realize that we're all on the same side. And I think that police officers are very diverse. There's police officers where they look into your eyes and you can tell that they just want to squish you like a bug, they despise you. But there's also police officers who hate what they're doing. I wasn't there, but I heard that when one of the nights Occupy was raided, police officers were crying because they didn't like doing what they're doing. And I think, once again, that we need to reach out to them, talk to them like human beings, not look at them all as the same as uniform. And the 1% means you make $340,000 or more a year. And most police officers don't make that. And I think some cops are definitely never ever going to come on our side. Some cops are just always going to hate us. But we should treat them as individuals, even though they all look the same.